So this is lesson 2.9, and before you get too excited that we're almost done with unit 2, I have good news and bad news for you. The good news is right here. No vocabulary in this lesson. The bad news is this lesson will take you 2 nights. I have 2 homework assignments at the end, and I expect you to do one as a finish for this video, and the second one will be reviewed tomorrow night. The reason why we're taking our time with this, and I'm going to give you 2 nights for it, is because this is particularly useful math. This is math that everybody will need to use during their lifetime, maybe not every day, but every week, every month. This is actual important math, and I need you to have a good grasp of it. So, useful math tool alert, the percent proportion. When you have a question that's in this format, A is P% of B, you can also think of it this way. A over B equals P over 100. That's why this is called the percent proportion. I turned the problem into a proportion. Another way to look at this, given the actual question, what percent of 80 is 60? And if you put that in regular English instead of wacky math book English, it says 60 is what percent of 80. You've got this. 60 is what percent of 80. And once you've plugged those numbers in, oh my gosh, it's a piece of cake, because you just cross multiply. And you end up with 6,000 equals 80p. Divide each side by 80. 75 equals p. How simple was that? Very simple. Moving on. So at the top of page 138, let's give this a little bit of practice. Problem 1, finding a percent using this percent proportion. First step, write it out. Doesn't even matter what the question is yet. A over B equals P over 100. Now take a look at the question. What percent of 56 is 42? Well, put those numbers in the right. So if 42 goes in here, 56 goes in here, P over 100, cross multiply. 42 times 100, 56 times P. Good. Multiply on this side, then you're going to divide each side by 56. 75 is equal to P. So the full answer, 42, is 75% of 56. Move over to your notebooks. Got it? Problem 1. You guys are going to love this one. The question in the book reads, what percent of 90 is 54? So here's how it fits in the proportion. A over B equals P over 100. Do your cross multiplication. 5400 equals 90p. Then you have to divide each side by p. You end up with 60 equals p. That's all well and good, right? But what happens if you mess up somewhere? Well, I can show you, because I did. Because you know now I'm scrutinizing my work very carefully. First time I did problem 1, I was zipping on through trying to get this finished, and I said, okay, what percent of 90 is 54? 90 over 54 equals P over 100. 9,000 equals 54p. Divide each side by 54. Wait a minute. How can 54 be 167% of 90? That makes no sense. And I was so stumped, and I thought, and it must have taken me 15 minutes to realize, oh duh, I put the numbers in my proportion the wrong way. So be thinking while you do these, because it'll help you catch your mistakes. So after I did that, I decided to leave it in my notebook so I could show you guys, but then I went ahead and did it correctly. So your next very, very useful tool is the percent equation. And this one I like better because it's more like directly translating the crazy English into math. This is what we started with before. A is P% of B, which we already know we can show as A over B equals P over 100. Or you can turn it into this. Here, let me cover this up over here because I don't want you looking at that part yet. You can turn it into A is the equal sign, P% means P over 100, of means multiply, B. This should be a little bit like review from before, because we were translating stuff from English into math. So all you need to remember is means equal sign, p% means p over 100, of means times, and b. So here's your percent equation. A equals p over 100 times b. They have it a little bit differently in the book. They use p and a percent sign. I'm going to show it to you this way. You can also look at what they show you on page 138 in the book. You use whichever works best for you. Now, you are at this point wondering, oh my gosh, how many of these stupid things do I have to remember? This is ridiculous. Well, take a look at what I covered up over here. Here's our percent proportion. What if I just manipulate it a little bit? What do we end up with? If I multiply each side of this by b so that I can clear out the b's over here, I end up with a equals p over 100 times b. These two things are just different ways of saying the exact same thing. So you can use whichever tool makes more sense to you. You can use whichever tool you can remember. You can use either tool if you like them both. Let's take a look at problem 2 in your book. Problem 2, using the percent equation. This is what I was talking about before. When they write out the percent equation, they use p%, whereas I put p over 100. Either way is correct. A equals p% of b. We're trying to figure out what percent of 40 is 2.5. Well, 2.5 is going to go here. The percent is what we're trying to figure out. That's going to remain a variable. Of 40 becomes times 40. So work through it. How are you going to do this? Oh yeah, gotta divide each side by 40. So that's what you end up with. And then remember this from, I don't know how old you were when you had to learn this. We ended up with 0.0625 equals p%. Move your decimal place over by 2. 6.25% is what you're looking for. I don't like that they put the percent sign there. They shouldn't have done that. Got it, number 2. Pull your notebooks back out. So they've given you a problem. They want you to use it first using the percent equation, which I wrote out here. Then they want you to solve it using the percent proportion, which I wrote out here. All right, we need our numbers. They've given us what percent of 84 is 63. So 63 is what percent of 84? Watch that again. The problem is what percent of 84 is 63. So I turned it into a regular sentence and I said 63 is what percent of 84? I could have solved this a few different ways. I could have started by multiplying each side by 100. I decided to start by dividing each side by 84. Why? Well, because then I ended up with a nice proportion that I could cross multiply on. So then we end up with 84p equals 63 times 100. Make sure you have the right number of zeros in here. Now I'm going to divide each side by 84. And you're going to end up with 75. They're going through this. You guys know now there are a few different ways that you could have tackled this. Like I was saying, you could have multiplied each side by 100 to get rid of this. As long as your arithmetic is correct and you do the same thing to each side of the equation, whatever solution, whatever process you used is fine. I need to be able to understand your process as you write your steps out, and of course your answer had better be 75. Otherwise something went wrong. Now, let's go ahead and do this starting with the percent proportion. Same problem. What percent of 84 is 63? So we've got the smaller part here, the whole part here, the variable p here, and 100 here. We're going to cross multiply. 6,300 equals 84p. Divide each side by 84, and we're back where we were. Come on back here for a second. Take a look at this. When we were setting up just proportions in the earlier lesson, we talked about how important it was to keep like things together. And in this percent proportion, we have entire things on the bottom and we have smaller parts on the top, right? Our entire, a number we're working with is 84, and the smaller part that we're curious about is 63. Well, when you're dealing with percents, the entire part is always 100, and the percent is what we're trying to find the variable for. So we've got part over whole on this side, and we've got part over whole on this side. So with problem 3 on page 139, we're not really changing anything other than which part of our equation we're looking for. They give us the cost of the shirt, they give us the percentage that it's on sale for, and they want to know what the sale price of the shirt is. So they are suggesting that you start with the percent equation, write out the percent equation, A equals P percent or P over 100 times B. Then put in what you know. You know that the shirt is 30% off. You know that its original price was $38.50, and we're trying to figure out what 30% of $38.50 is. So A remains our variable. Very important here, they converted this into a decimal. Remember to get rid of the percent sign, move that decimal point over 2 places. So now we have 0.30 times 38.50, multiply it. But we're not done yet, because now we know what 30% of 38.50 is, but we don't know what the sale price of the shirt is. We have to take $11.55 away from the original price. So $38.50 minus $11.55 gives us $26.95. That's the sale price of the shirt. Step 1 is not enough. You got to go on and do step 2. So we're going to talk about a couple ways to do this sort of problem with Got It number 3. Some of you are not going to be very happy with me. Go back to your notebooks. So problem 3 says a family sells a car to a dealership for 60% less than they paid for it. They paid $9,000 for the car. For what price did they sell the car? Well, here is my percent equation. A is what we don't know. We're looking to figure out 60% of 9,000. And again, there are several ways that you can tackle this. You can divide each side by 9,000. You can multiply each side by 100. If you wrote 60 with a percent sign, maybe you just move the decimal point 2 places. Lots of ways you could do this. That's why I need to see your steps. Here are my steps. I decided to multiply each side by 100 to get rid of this fraction. So I have 100A equals 60 times 9,000. Next I'm going to multiply 60 and 9,000. 100A equals 540,000. Then divide each side by 100. You end up with A equals $54,000. But we're not done yet. We are not done. Don't stop here. That was not how much they sold the car for. They sold the car for 60% less than they paid for it. That 60% is $5,400. We need to subtract. Yeah, see? Not done yet. We need to subtract that 60% less from the original price. And that gives us $3,600. And I circled it. That is our answer. Okay. If these percentages are just kind of doing this to you, I really want you to skip what I'm about to do next. If you are just kind of grasping this, just go with it and don't just skip over the next thing. If this is all pretty simple and fairly straightforward to you, I want to ask you a question. Instead of doing this problem 2 steps and figuring out what 60% of the original price of the car was and then having to subtract, what would happen if you just thought, okay, we sold the car for 60% less than we paid for it. In other words, we sold the car for 40% of what we paid. In which case, we sold that car for 40% of what we paid for it. This time I solved this by, I crossed out a 0 from the top and the bottom of this fraction to get 4/10. Then, I don't know if you guys are aware of this cheating yet, but I'm going to show it to you. You can cross out this 0 with one of these zeros. So now we end up with A is equal to 4 over 1 times 900. A is equal to 3,600. 40% is 3,600. We're done. We don't have to subtract again. That's a little shortcut. You might want to go through and watch it again. With problem 4, we're not really changing anything again other than which number we're looking for. They've asked you the question, 125% of what number is 17.5? Write your percent equation, A equals P percent times B. Then plug in what you know. We know 17.5 is 125% of something. So from this point, it's easy, but you must remember, if you've written it out with the percent sign, you got to move that decimal point 2 places before you can manipulate anything. That's why I prefer to write it out as 125 over 100. Then I don't forget to move the decimal point. And they go through the math. 14 is B, so 125% of 14 is 17.5. Smaller number, bigger number. 17.5 is 125% of a smaller number. Got it? Number 4, 30% of what number is 12.5? And they want you to solve the problem a couple of different ways, so get your notebook. So, confession, teacher prerogative, I only wanted to do this once, so I only did it once. Here is the percent equation, A equals P over 100 times B. Here's what we know. 12.5 is 30% of something. Now that we've got the numbers in place, just work your equation like you know how to do. Again, this time I decided to multiply each side by 100. There are several different things you could have done. Just show me your steps. Don't forget to move your decimal point over here. And now I've got 1,250 equals 30b. Divide each side by 30. And you could have come up with 41 2/3 equals b, or 41.6 repeating. So, the simple interest formula on the bottom of page 139. This is one of the things I was talking about that is actually useful in everyday life. So even though this chapter is getting kind of long and your homework's going to be kind of long, I want you to make sure you understand it. Here's the formula. I equals PRT. Just remember that. I equals PRT. It'll stick in your head forever. I remember it, and I learned it, I'm not going to tell you how many years ago. It was more than 5. And what do those numbers stand for? I is your interest, P is the principal, R is the annual interest rate, written as a decimal, and T is the time in years. What the heck does that mean? That means that if you take out a loan for $25, that's your principal. And if the bank charges you 10%, that is your rate. And if you have the loan for 1 year, T would be 1. And this formula can show you how much interest you have to pay on the loan. You can send me an email if you need a bigger explanation on this. Whenever you borrow money, they charge you a little bit of money for the privilege of borrowing it. That's how the bank makes money at it, or the credit card company, or whoever else you're dealing with. So, memorize the formula. I equals PRT. Or, in this example, you are investing. If you invest $50 at 3.5% per year for 3 years, here's what you can figure out. Your interest from that investment will be 50, your principal, times your interest rate. Look at what they did. It's 3.5%, so they had to move the decimal point, times 3 years. You would earn $5.25 on that money just by letting it sit in that account. Very helpful thing to know. Even more useful stuff at the top of page 140, and I'm really hoping this is not new to you. They give you some common percentages. It might be worth your while to memorize these. You should know that 1% is the same as 1/100th, 5% is the same as 1/20th, 50% is the same as 1/2, 66.6 repeating percent is the same thing as 2/3, and so on. 100% is the same thing as 1. These should be very familiar to you. Problem 5, moving on, using the simple interest formula, and you'll see why they gave you those fractions. You deposited $840 in a savings account that earns a simple interest rate of 4.5% per year. You want to keep the money in the account for 4 years. How much interest will you earn? That is a good thing to know. Then they say check your answer for reasonableness, which I'm not sure I knew was a word. First, remember your formula. I equals PRT. Then plug in what you know. You know your principal, what you deposited, $840. You know that your simple interest rate is 4.5%, and they've moved the decimal point already. Don't forget that. You're keeping the money in an account for 4 years. There's your time. How much interest will you earn? Multiply that out. You end up with $151.02. That's not bad on $840 to start with. Then when they say check for reasonableness, they're rounding. We started with an interest rate of 4.5% a year, which is almost 5%. We know that 5% is 1/20th. So down here they just checked. Well, 840 times 1/20th times 4 years equals 42 times 4, which is 168, which is pretty close to 151.2. This is just a quick estimate to make sure that you are on the right track with your answer. Got it, number 5, and then we are almost done with this video. So we deposited $125 in a savings account that earns a simple interest rate of 1.75% per year. You earned a total of $8.75 in interest. For how long was your money in the account? Well, start with your formula. I equals P times R times T. Interest, in other words, interest earned, is going to equal the principal that you put in, the rate, which is the 1.75%, times the time that it's in there. So plug in what we know. $125 was our principal. Our rate, this time I added the other numbers that we need to know. We know that the interest we earned was $8.75, so that goes in place of the I, equals 125, and then I've converted this from 1.75% to 0.0175 times the time. This is what we're trying to figure out. How long was the money in the account? So start simplifying, combining like terms. You multiply those. You end up with 2.19t. Divide each side by 2.19, and you end up with 4 is approximately equal to t. So check that for reasonableness. Come on back up here. 1.75% is close to 2%, which is 2/100ths. Is 2/100ths times 1.25 times 4 years close to 8.75? You pull out your calculators and you find out, yes, Margaret, it is. Are we done with this yet, Margaret? And yes, in fact, we are, but here's the other thing that I have been alluding to. I'm not giving you a choice tonight. I don't want you to do either or. I want you to do both. So tonight, I want you to do page 141, 9 through 29 odd. Tomorrow night, no new video to watch. You can come back and review this video if you wish. But I want you to do page 142, 31 to 49 odd. Why are we doing this? Well, because percentages are important things for you to understand. This kind of questions about percentages, are all over all of these standardized tests that you're going to start being deluged with, and you need to understand it. So that's what we're doing.